Welcome back to CNET Live at CES 2016. I'm Brian Cooley. Cooley, that's my new name. We're off to a good start. Luckily, I've got able support. Real broadcasters, our TV gurus, David Katzmaier and Pendlebury. Come in here at the end of the show. You guys have no excuse not to have all the answers, because you've digested everything.
Or we've forgotten it all by now.
Or forgotten it all by now. This is arguably the kind of the most fun of the focus segments we do here at CES. Let's face it, we all love a TV. Everyone in this show loves TVs. They're big, they're beautiful, and they just have a tastiness about them. Let's get right into it now. The most audacious thing we saw rolls up like a piece of parchment paper.
Yes, the LG 18-inch rollable display, like nothing I've ever seen. The cool part about it's OLED, so organic light emitting diode displays can kind of be rolled into this shape because they're extremely thin.
Yeah.
This thing is, what, I want to say 0.18 millimeters thick. Just about
thick paper.
Yeah, right. And you can roll it up. They didn't let me roll this one up. This one's actually plugged in, so it works. Of course, the downside is, where do you put the HDMI cable on a rollable TV? They're still working on that. But it allows, in the future, you can picture, rolling these up like a newspaper, taking the TVs with you. They're trying to get it bigger and just improve this really cool concept.
Use case?
Again, portability, impressing people at CES.
Newspapers, magazines, digital magazines.
Well, that's interesting, isn't it? To merge the two media.
Yeah.
Because right now we think that print is print and video is video, and they have a portability, they have a movability or non-movability, interactivity difference. Maybe they could add a touch layer to this one day.
There you go. I'm sure they will.
All of a sudden it's amazing. Then, like you say, if it's just a thin little backplane that has HDMI and battery, maybe a little wireless radio in there, and all of a sudden, Jetsons.
There you go.
Okay, now this is the most interesting of the big TVs. We get giant TVs here at the show every year. It's one of the kind of ding-dong headlines, I think. It's like, so-and-so's got a 180-inch TV, and then you never see nor care about it again.
Yes.
It's the Emirates first-class suite of CES. Want it, love it, will never have access to it. But here, this one is composed of pieces.
Yes, so Samsung's 170-inch, the largest one I've ever seen at CES.
Giant.
Massive, but it's not one panel. It's X number of these little panels that kind of fit together, and each of the panels goes right to the edge, so when they're all put together, you can't tell that they're put together. It looks just like a complete flat panel. So this little display here is
these are
great.
those segments.
Yeah, and you can see they look like one TV, and then all of a sudden, they're these little modules. And Samsung says one of the big cool things about this is that these really large TVs are really hard to ship. They break in shipping.
Yeah.
So when you're shipping these modules, it's a lot easier, and you can get them to be as large as you need to. So TVs are just getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, but how large they need to be before they're impossible to ship.
And these segments are what, about a foot square or something?
Yeah, they're a little bit bigger than that, but and they're not quite square. So you can make them into the 16 by 9 or even the 21 by 9
of course.
shape.
How do you build
Right.
Yeah.
So you need the widescreen, or maybe you want a TV that goes from widescreen to CinemaScope, which is 21 by 9. You can do that as well, and not have any black bars. So that's a pretty cool transformable concept.
I got to say, I came along on this one. I thought, okay, this sounds like a retail installation or a commercial display industry thing.
It could be gimmicky, but when you think about it, there are some real uses for it.
And this addresses the yield issue, because big panels are hard to make. Little panels are easy.
A really good point, Brian.
Do
this for a living, right?
Sign me up.
There you go.
All right. Ty, you've got a piece of home audio that you're in love with, and this is often one that they skip that part of CES sometimes.
Right.
It doesn't blink.
It's kind of hidden over in the Venetian where no one goes.
Okay, so it's hidden there to begin with.
Right.
But there's some speakers that you say are the best anywhere at their price.
Absolutely. Back 4 years ago now, the LG OLED, remember that thing? The first OLED that came out.
Yeah.
I was really excited about that TV. I had the same level, or the same feeling about this product when I saw it yesterday at the Venetian on the 30th floor.
Yeah.
Essentially, it's a small bookshelf speaker. It's very cheap. It's $500. It's designed by Andrew Jones, who was at Pioneer, now at ELAC America. That basically started up an American arm of this German company.
Okay.
And he's making budget, entry-level speakers that sound amazing.
I've got it here on the screen. Let's pull that up. Okay, so there it is. I mean, speakers sometimes can just look very unimpressive.
Right.
It's a pretty speaker.
Right.
But I would look at it and say, okay, it's got 2 drivers and it sits in a box and
So you see, the weird thing about that top driver is actually a concentric driver. So it's actually got a tweeter in the middle of a mid-range.
Oh, interesting.
So
right there,
it's separated. It's actually divorced from the base drivers, so they don't interfere with each other. Very,
so they're
very
truly
cool.
floating concentric drivers.
Right, and it's very cool technology at a really good price.
So tell me how the average person would be amazed by this. What might I hear that would make me say, okay, wow, that is amazing?
Well, you'll just hear a lot of bass. It's a really small speaker. You'll hear a lot of bass coming out of that you'd only hear from a floor standing speaker.
Okay.
The imaging, it's amazing. It's like you don't hear the speakers themselves, you just hear a wide range of sound across the whole plane.
Yeah, because the worst imaging is usually when you can really specifically hear left and right speaker.
Right.
And it sounds like you have two speakers.
Right. This is hi-fi at an entry-level price. It's really amazing.
Nice. Okay, so there's a great speaker for your home theater system. These would be great for your like main left and right in the front of the room, for example.
Absolutely,
Okay.
and rears as well.
Okay, nice. $500 a pair, not bad. Quantum dot technology. We're going to talk about a TV and we're going to educate folks. First of all, what are quantum dots?
Well, quantum dot is a technology that you can apply to the inside an LCD television. They're basically little nanocrystals, miniature crystals that focus the light from the liquid crystal for the LED backlight. So the lights, the LED lights shine through the SUHD, in this case, quantum dots, and focus the light, purify the light, make it a little bit better, a little bit wider than the LEDs could do normally. So then they hit the liquid crystals, which are also RGB, and the end result is a wider color gamut and what Samsung is calling a purer light. Quantum dots are used on other TVs, of course, but Samsung is the real main proponent of it this year. And the benefit that we've seen is that you get this wider color coverage than you would with other LCD technologies.
It's a path to HDR.
That's part of HDR, is the wide color gamut, is the representation of more of the colors in nature that you had on the screen than you would before.
So just so we have it right now, you've got an LED backlight as usual in the back, then there's a layer of quantum dot technology, and then you have your liquid crystals in front.
So it's a sandwich.
Okay, this goes in the middle.
It's a big contrast to OLED, which is, again, we looked at it before, these really thin displays that are basically one layer. Because OLED is emissive, you
Color
don't need
and light comes out of the same layer.
Yeah, you don't need all these fancy things.
So
So the OLEDs can be incredibly thin.
Okay.
The SUHD, they actually showed a really thin concept SUHD too, but they can't get it that thin. And obviously you're not going to roll up an LCD TV anytime soon.
Yeah, especially when you've got layers of expensive technology in there.
But it would break.
Right, be a lot of shattered parts. Now I want to get a graphic up here as we continue to talk about HDR, because you mentioned that's part of it, is showing more colors that the human eye can see.
Yes.
And then there's also a contrast piece. But so people can understand a little bit more about this whole idea of colors, I have a only moderately wonky graphic. We used this a couple days ago, but now we actually have the experts here. So this big old lobe is all the colors the human eye can see.
Yes.
All right? And if I have this right, the small triangle in here represents what the current spec for HD TV can show. It's a smallish subset that is, I don't know, it looks like it's about half the colors I can see. Now here's my question for you guys. I've heard about both these two triangles, P3 and 2020, two different specs, both being considered in the HDR realm. Can you clear that up a little bit?
Well, yeah, it's pretty simple. I mean, nobody can make 2020. Doesn't exist. There's
okay,
no
so
display.
this bigger one here that is on the outer
there's
edge.
no display that can actually hit all the color points to accurately produce 2020.
Okay.
Maybe at some point in the future, some quantum dot magician will create it. But right now, we're looking at.
So we're back to this now, P3.
So P3 is the maximum that you can get on a display today. There's an advantage, though, because actually the content producers are making things inside a 2020 container. You want to make it, the content itself, in as large of a container as you can, so then you can kind of dumb it down. And
Future-proofs it as well.
Right, so you can scale the color down to a P3 or down to a 709, depending on what the television can handle. And that's one of the benefits of HDR. HDR specs have the ability to actually take into consideration the television's own capabilities and scale the content dynamically to what the TV can actually produce.
Okay, because you always want to feed a television the max, if not more, than it can show, and let it pull that down.
And right now, what you're feeding these TVs is 709, and the TVs are capable of much wider than that generally.
Interesting. Okay.
So you want to have the content match what the TV can produce at its best.
So just for folks to know, I mean, look at this graphic and look how little of the color your eye can see that your HD TV shows in this 709 spec we use today. Anything that gets toward more of those colors. And the other part is the dynamic range between dark and light, right?
Yeah, so that's actually what HDR is really impactful for. So the HDR TVs that they're coming out, the very best of them can hit 1,000 nits, which is a spec really bright, And that means that the highlights, for example, the glint of sunlight or any sort of really bright color looks much more realistic. And skies are a good example. And so you have the TV able to produce these really bright highlights, and it makes it look spectacular if you have a really powerful, expensive television that can produce these kinds of things. The problem with HDR right now is that all of these TVs are getting HDR compatibility, so they may or may not actually give you much benefit at the end of the day. So a lot of guys are selling HDR compatibility on their mid and lower range televisions, and those are the ones that are not going to really give you that great impact. So we'll have to see how HDR is implemented throughout the year and what kind of pictures you can actually get out of it. The other side is content.
So HDR is not just a matter of a certain spec, it's a matter of how well they execute what they say is on the label.
Absolutely.
It's not binary.
That's always the rub.
Always the rub, isn't it? Although 4K was different. I mean, 4K is a little simpler. It's like you either have that many dots or you don't.
Right.
It's a little more of a switch.
Yeah, 4K is easy to understand, but again, the implementation is not necessarily going to give you a greater picture quality just because it's 4K.
And you guys believe HDR is the undersung hero of the new resolutions and color technologies.
HDR has the potential to be incredible, and the other thing about HDR is that it's a whole suite of content improvements. So Hollywood creates these things. They actually scale the movie or the TV show to HDR.
Yeah.
And they're in there making their decisions on their mastering displays and punching up certain areas.
All the color
and they have a much wider palette to do those things with. They have a much wider range of color, a much wider dynamic range of light to dark to make these decisions and make the video look more like they intend.
Okay, so bottom line is HDR is arguably more important than 4K.
I would say.
To the eye, you can actually see the difference.
Argument.
You can really see the,
you can't actually really.
Easily more important.
Easily more important. Okay, so that's the key thing to take away from this, guys. You're going to hear 4K, and it's very understandable, but know that HDR is the harder to tell, more important story around your next television purchase.
I think we did a pretty good job. It wasn't that hard.
No, right?
No.
More colors better.
All right.
Simple. LG G6. The LG OLEDs have been the one that we are widely quoted in their advertising lately because they love us for saying best picture ever, right?
Yeah.
And this is the son of best picture ever?
It's the better than best picture ever.
Good grief.
Because, it's CES, so how could you possibly be the best, again, because this is the new year. They bumped up the brightness, they improved the color gamut, they actually bumped it out almost all the way, they're saying, to the edge of P3. So they can do all these things, and they also made it a lot thinner. So this TV you're looking at right now is the G6, the top of the line, really crazy thin. Again, you can't roll it without breaking it. Right. But you can, enjoy this amazing dynamic range because, the real selling point of OLED is and always has been the very deep blacks that you can get on the screen, basically infinite, is complete black. And from there, you marry that with the really bright highlights, and you get an incredible picture.
Because this does something that plasma could never do. I don't know if anyone's ever got a plasma TV. Whenever white comes on the screen, it sort of it closes down. It's like it'll go kind of red, depending on the plasma that you have. Whereas this OLED, you get white, it's white. You get black, it's black. So
it can get much brighter than plasma.
Tremendous fidelity to the picture.
Absolutely.
And of course, these are ultra thin. Plasma could never do that, right?
Yeah. And there's other advantages too. Especially compared to LCD. When you go off angle, I think that's the biggest demonstration. You go off angle on an LCD, or if you look at your laptop from the side,
starts to gray out.
Absolutely, it washes out. The colors get less fidelity. So with OLED, that
doesn't do that.
No. Jeez. Looks great from the crappy seat on the edge of the room.
Okay, this big boy we just saw, how big was that TV?
That was 65. They also make it into 77 this year. New for this year, the 77 is flat, not curved. In fact, props to LG for making most of their lineup flat.
The way we like them. The 65 price on that?
Not determined yet. They actually said it would be less than $10,000. I'm guessing it's about $1 less than $10,000.
Okay, a big discount.
Yeah.
I'm a super skeptic on this one. 4K Blu-ray players. Tell me I'm right or wrong.
4K Blu-ray players. Well, I think it's going to be the last ever disc format. They'll probably try to get more through, but they'll probably try an 8K player, for example. But 4K is the limit because obviously you've got Netflix, you've got Amazon coming through with 4K streaming services.
Right.
They vary in quality, but I mean, some of the stuff we've seen, for example, House of Cards in 4K, looks really, really nice.
As a stream?
Yeah, as a stream.
It looks pretty good, huh?
So it depends on the content providers to get the streaming service correct, but the thing is that the 4K Blu-ray will be basically a reference quality. It will look really good.
It's always going to look. Always going to have an edge.
You're reaching a point of diminishing returns in picture quality of the format, of the delivery format. I think. So Blu-ray looks really, really good, and in fact, you can even argue that Blu-ray looks better than some 4K streams. But streaming looks really, really good too. So, to get 4K Blu-ray.
And we don't go home and A/B anything. Let's face it, when we get home, great is great.
Yeah.
Right.
And usually the part that breaks down is the display itself or your calibration or something like that. The actual delivery format, it's going to look really good.
Okay, and this is all, and a lot of folks ask, how's that ever going to get across my home broadband? They have new codecs that go along with this, H.265, VP9. They're finding a way to give you a large number of pixels and more color data in there, which is the bit range, and do it with not too much more bandwidth, as I understand it.
And that's huge, to be able to pack all that. I kind of like the idea of, for example, HDR video with 1080p resolution instead of 4K. So all of a sudden you're taking those pixels you can't even tell the difference with 4K anyway, using that bandwidth not to have all these pixels you can't see, but to actually improve the dynamic range, the color, and even the frame rate if they want to. They can make it 60 frames,
Right, that's
120
another data lever, the frame rate. In general, though, these HDR TV, you got to buy 4K, right? There's not a lot of 1080p HDR?
No, I'm just saying for the content itself. In fact, there are no
desire.
4K TVs that no HDR TVs that aren't 4K.
Okay.
So,
Right.
So it's
but they'll
an
upscale
academic.
it to 4K anyway, so you won't be able to tell the difference. You won't see any sort of screen door
Yeah,
effect
the
or
internal
anything.
upscaling on 4K TVs is pretty good, right?
Absolutely.
When I buy mine.
Much better than
it
when
has
they
to be,
first
'cause
started.
you're not going
Okay.
to watch much
Yeah.
4K content. So.
All right, so my existing DVD library or Blu-ray library is going to get pulled up by that 4K. Okay, so this is all LG and Samsung, a lot of big names, but I hear about TCL and Hisense and a few others. Where are these next generation upstarts standing as of the end of this year?
So both those companies you just mentioned are Chinese guys. They're number 1 and 2, Hisense number 1, TCL number 2 in China, and Hisense is number 3 in the world in terms of TV shipments. So these guys are really big, and they really want the US market. So at CES, they kind of made a big push in the US market. All of them announced a bunch of different televisions. Both of them announced high-end televisions that do all this stuff that we just talked about, the HDR, the quantum dots,
I
the
saw
curved
that at
screens.
TCL for sure.
Absolutely. TCL even supports Dolby Vision, which is another HDR format that's pretty rarely supported right now. So these guys are really trying to say, hey, you know what? The other thing Hisense did, they went out and bought the Sharp name. So everybody's heard of
they own
Sharp.
Sharp?
Yeah, so Sharp doesn't have a booth anymore. I don't know if you noticed.
I noticed
but
that.
yeah.
Now that you mention it.
You got to find, the Sharp TVs are in the back of the Hisense booth. You got to make an appointment or whatever. But Sharp exists in the marketplace, and Hisense bought them to basically improve their own image. So you end up with having these Chinese guys that are going to undercut the LGs and the Samsungs of the world, and be at that Vizio price point and take share away from Vizio perhaps.
We've seen this story before.
Yeah, so
right?
they're the new guys in the marketplace, and of course they're going in at the expense of Vizio and to a large extent to the Samsungs, or sorry, to the Sonys and the Panasonics, which are definitely fading popularity. Sony's actually done a pretty good job of maintaining the high end. They have some pretty good high end TVs, but they're not doing anything to sell in that mid range, kind of the sweet spot of the market.
And TCL seems to have gone almost wall to wall with Roku integration going forward.
Yeah, the Roku TVs, my favorite smart TV functionality is Roku built in. TCL sells a lot of them, and they built a Roku 4K TV this year, which is really interesting. So you can get all those 4K apps and streaming apps, 4K Netflix, 4K Amazon, built right into the Roku TV interface, which is, again, the best, my favorite. So
can I get a TCL 4K with Roku and HDR?
Not this year, but
quite all
maybe.
four.
Yeah, yeah. I want to see all these guys just stop baking their own, smart TV and put in Roku.
Just put Roku in.
Yeah,
for
I mean,
crying
come
out
on.
loud.
We're going to hook a Roku up to it anyway.
How many years have we been saying this? At least 3 that I can recall where it's like, guys, Roku's still the benchmark.
Yeah,
for width of content.
Yes.
And they held off Chromecast. Like Chromecast
Which is
came
amazing,
in
right?
and didn't kill their market.
No, I mean Roku's still number 1.
Yeah.
Apple's still number 4 of the big 4, right? I mean, still kind of a niche player with Apple TV.
Yeah, it's
and then Amazon and Chromecast in the middle there somewhere.
Yeah,
Yeah. All right. This is a great. You just take this show and you know how to go buy your next TV, including waiting a while, right, for things to settle out.
Especially with HDR.
HDR, the prices
there's
and technologies get a little better executed and come down.
Yeah.
Thank you guys, really appreciate it. Ty Pendlebury, David Katzmaier, talking about the biggest, most beautiful thing at CES every year, the television and home entertainment category.